Hello everyone. This video contains a presentation which was made for a webinar organized by MCM College of Management, Bengaluru on the 29th of August. I'm extremely grateful to Dr. Prabhudev for giving me this opportunity to be a resource person.
These are well-known people, like Sir was already mentioning about different people who have overcome several obstacles. Malala, Opera. Then Sir also mentioned about people with disabilities. Now, this is a person, if you see towards the left, she is visually impaired. And she has gone on to win several world championships and awards in the Paralympic uh, games all over in different tournaments. That's her guide next to her, and she's a skiing. She's in the sport of skiing, which requires so much of courage and I would say it requires you to really be very agile and alert. But yet, with all her limitations of not being able to see, she has been in this field and has achieved really good success. She says, "I attribute success to the fact that I love skiing and I still work on myself." Please pay attention to every word that she says. I think they are really, really, it carries so much about, or it says so much about the person. I think that I am mentally strong enough, again, mental strength, as I have always managed to return to the top after many injuries. Even recently, a few years ago, she had an injury where she crashed while she was skiing. And yet, despite all the physical challenges she faced, she was still able to bounce back and actually go on to win the Paralympian award of the year. And she was selected among so many members. Likewise, you can see this gentleman in the red and black outfit. He is also a sprinter and a very well-known name in the Paralympic space. He's also long jump. He's won a lot of awards in long jump and several categories of athletics. He says he was afraid of the challenge, that is, of losing his limb. He lost his limb due to cancer when he was a very young child before his teenage. But he was very determined that he wanted to do something in sport, and he did not accept people looking at him differently. He did not accept people telling him that he was disabled and so he might be limited in his opportunities. So he kept waiting for the right type of a coach or person to accept him and really push him forward in this space. So he says, I was afraid of the reaction of people. At first, they didn't want me to show my prosthetic itself. And that's something people really struggle with. I said, no, guys, I went through lots of situations in my life and I'm not hiding it. So this again shows how acceptance and embracing one's circumstances and really working with that to turn that into an opportunity or your strength is immensely crucial when you talk about agility or growing from adversity and situations like these. So from this, we see that setbacks or crisis was not the end of their story. And we see these examples not just in famous people who have achieved a lot. We also see people who may have, in day-to-day life, we come across several situations of struggle, overcoming challenges. Even in the chat box, I was looking at somebody mentioning about the COVID warriors currently, the doctors, the nurses, the immense amount of sacrifices, or people who have lost their loved ones, and several such things where they've faced several life challenges. All of that can be considered as a setback or a crisis. It need not be something so famous or something so devastating. Even smaller things and smaller ways, our life is challenged and changed in many ways. So these crisis situations are actually the beginning of a transformation story. And throughout this presentation, we'll be talking about how we can move towards this transforming towards a better outlook or an approach to life, or how you can actually catalyze these experiences to develop more strength. So from what we've discussed, even what Sir was sharing about different people and their success stories, from what we have seen here, what are the ingredients of their success? Is it good luck? Is it willpower? Is it their personality? A lot has been spoken about having a certain disposition or a way of approaching life, or being very easygoing, being laid back. But is it just that? Is it the kind of support they received? Many people have a very supportive environment, whereas others are quite disadvantaged when it comes to this factor. Is it resilience? Now, even Sir was mentioning, what is resilience? It is more like a capacity to bounce back. So you've had a certain a base level performance or a certain set point, and then disruption happens due to crisis. You're able to bounce back to what you used to be before, or with greater strength. We'll talk about some of these topics even later on in the coming slides. Probably it's a mix of all these factors, one would say, because when you try to pinpoint only one, it may not be. Now, the important question is, do we have a choice over these combination of factors? Is it something we are bestowed with? Is it something that happens because of destiny? Or is it something within our control that can be developed and can be modified to suit our requirements and our outlook? So the answer here is yes, we do have a choice, because what we choose, our choice, we are responsible for the consequences, or it does change things in a certain way. No, also because sometimes we are thrown off guard and situations or circumstances may just happen in such a way that no amount of planning or preparedness can actually help us. So, two things in life we have complete control over. If you want, you can take a second to think, what exactly do you have control over? What is it that you can say, I have complete control over? Our attitude, our effort. So these are two things that no one can take away from us. Nobody in any form can interfere or influence if you have made up your mind that this is what it's going to be like, or this is what you want to do. Now, here's another example of an exemplary person who has overcome challenges and who has overcome a lot of hardship in life. He is a Holocaust survivor. He was a prisoner at that time, a very famous person in the psychology circle as well. Spiritually, also, his work is really, it has a lot of relevance. So he is Viktor Frankl, who was a neurologist, and then he was in this camp for a long time, survived several, as we know, the kind of situations that were there. And during that time, he had so many reflections and so many insights about life itself that he went on to, after he survived it, he went on to write all his experiences. He developed a type of therapy called as logotherapy. It talks about existential, challenges and how we see life as a broader, in a broader perspective. So here, if you look at his quote, he also talks about attitude. He says, everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, everything but one, the last of human freedoms. So despite being chained and prisoned and all his freedom was removed, except one thing, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances and to choose one's own way. So this is something he says, the human spirit as such, you cannot rob this from us. It's one of the things that you're completely free about. No one can really chain you up or prison you with this aspect. And that, I think, is something for all of us to ponder on. How many times have we given up to situations, or have we let situations dictate our attitude, our responses? It's time to think about it. So are we always in control? Maybe sometimes the initial impact of the situation may be too much and we feel helpless or we feel out of control. So I would say we are not always in control. um, the way the situations impact, the value it has for us will determine how we react. But we can create opportunities and develop strategies that work in our favor. So mental agility and some of the other attributes that we were talking about, resilience and all that, comes in this space. We can really choose how we can create opportunities within that given circumstance. So how do we create a hopeful situation and locate opportunities? Let's look at crisis as an opportunity for change. Normally, we look at crisis as an enemy, as something that is not good. It has to be defended, has to be, we have to protect ourselves. But some people, and many who have succeeded and overcome challenges, mention crisis to be their actual friend, crisis to be the actual catalyst. And they look back in their life and say that if this hadn't happened to me, maybe I wouldn't have reached where I am. Maybe I wouldn't have realized my potential. So the next few slides of this presentation will be taking us through looking at crisis as an opportunity. Things don't happen to you, they happen for you. I would request you to read this again and ponder over it for a few seconds. They're very quick to to blame things that happen to us, to pity ourselves, like it was mentioned earlier also, to remain in that feeling that we are a victim of our circumstances. However, people who are able to look at crisis as an opportunity will say things happen for me, for my growth, for my transformation, for my awareness. It may happen to make me aware of something that I didn't know. And we talk about potential. And if you look at any success story, whether the smallest daily day to day life examples or the people who have really gone on to achieve bigger things, they would say one thing, that crisis really helped them discover who they were. They helped them discover something that was hidden within them, and they probably didn't know they had this strength. Even the Holocaust survivors, if you've read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, he talks about he narrates his whole experience there. And they emphasize this need of looking at crisis as a way of how without it they wouldn't be where they are today. Okay, so that's a good outlook, or rather a good way for us to think that this is also a way for us to conceptualize crisis. Generally, when we look at crisis, we would say, or we would define it as, it's something where it puts us in a situation of lack of control, deficit in the resources to meet the demands of the crisis. And this is very similar to what we say in psychology about stress, where we say that the situation is so stressful because there are too many demands and too less resources to meet. So there's a mismatch between both these factors. And the uncertain outcome adds more to the stress or more to the experience of crisis, because you don't know what to expect, therefore you don't feel control, therefore you cannot predict and you cannot modify any of your responses or feel like you can do something about it. It does require an immediate response, and that adds most to the pressure, because you are in a situation where you have to act, you have to respond in some way. So that makes the whole experience very difficult, or rather it's so in your face that you have to deal with it. But the only way is through. You can't get over a crisis unless you want to avoid it and you have that option. It's fair enough. Otherwise, mostly we are put in situations where we've got to work through it in one way or the other. Whether it's the best way or not, we don't know. But we've got to keep sailing through whatever it is. Now, crisis can also be looked at as a way of pushing us out of our comfort zone. As we also have read in a lot of research, people say that their growth, their personal growth, that means becoming more strong, becoming more mature, having a better perspective, learning a lot more things, or just becoming more accommodative of their perspective, all this happens more only in a crisis situation, not when you're comfortable and when you're happy and you don't want to look at anything as a problem. Crisis also helps us discover new potential, as we just mentioned, and appreciation for life. This is an important factor. If you look at any of the people who have survived crisis, if you look at their testimonies, or the what they say about being transformed, they will always say, I learned to appreciate life better. I learned to appreciate what I have in life. I learned to appreciate even the little things that I took for granted. Because in crisis, anything and everything can become a resource. Anything and everything, even the smallest help, will mean so much to you. So it really reorganizes the way you look at life, or your whole outlook of what it is, what things mean to you, what relationships mean to you. And sometime later I'll be talking about this as well, in something called as post-traumatic growth. In psychology, we talk about that. Appreciation seems to be an important theme there. But despite having all these benefits, I would say, we also say that crisis is difficult. And why do we feel it so? So this is a theoretical perspective that I'm going to give you briefly about what we talk in psychology, especially in positive psychology. So it's a mix of different things, like how we respond in stressful situations. Okay, what is our way of interpreting or cognition during those times? What is our general way of understanding life, and why does it impact us so much? Where does this transformation or growth, where is it possible? And also positive psychology, things like resilience, or developing a new perspective, optimism, where or how does it rather fit in theoretically. So I'll just quickly take you through this. We live in an assumptive world. Now, an assumptive world can be something like, mm, we have certain beliefs, we have certain understandings, so maybe we've been told that this is how life is, life will be good, or we see a lot of movies and these fairy tale kind of endings where we say, oh, in the end everything works out well, in the end there's always a happy ending, the villain always gets over, there's always good over evil, or the hero will always be the star of the story, villain will not. So we have a lot such programming, a lot of conditioning, a lot of ways in which we are taught how the world is or how our life should be. And it's not wrong, I'm not saying we shouldn't have an optimistic view, but there comes a problem when this is very fixed, and then we have this view that everything is fair, everything is just in the world, and everything will work out well. So when it doesn't work out well, it really impacts us. So what happens when that doesn't happen? Our assumptions are shattered, our beliefs are shattered. So uh, excuse me, during this time there is either a fight or flight response. Now this is again something we see in stress, something we see where people will either use all their might and resources to tackle what is there in front of them, or they try to escape. So when you deliberate, or when you try to engage with the topic, when you try to understand what is going on, then you're deliberating actively, you're involving, you're fighting it. But when you try to run away from it or escape, then you are disengaging, or rather you're trying to block that out, which is also an effort. And people really get tired trying to block that, or trying to deal with all the negative emotions. You will find that you get very tired also at that time, because the body really consumes a lot of energy to keep those worries and anxiety at bay. Now, here is where there is change that is possible. When something happens negative to us, it is very intrusive. It's something that keeps on and on playing in our mind. There are flashbacks, nightmares. Sir was mentioning about so many memories that people may have. So it's almost like you're scarred for life. And especially in the initial days when it's just a recent time that since something has really impacted you, it will take a bigger toll. However, people who are intended or moving towards a growth mindset, wanting to help themselves, they will move into a reflective mode. So reflection involves what you try to see what is good for you, what is the lesson for you in this, what can you learn from it. So it's good to move into that mode as well. The intrusive part is more loaded with emotions, so we will feel very emotionally controlled by how we are going, whatever we are going through. But reflection is more about thinking and more about perspective and understanding the whole situation, making sense of it and making meaning out of it, like was mentioned earlier as well. So if people can concentrate on this, or you can help people to concentrate on this after a certain time, of course, it will be very beneficial. So meaning reconstruction happens, your perspective is expanded. We call this as benefit finding. That means you try to see what benefit the crisis had for you in that particular situation. What did you learn, or what did you gain out of it, or what is still with you that you can be grateful for, and things like that. These are more in line with the growth response to create an altered way of looking at life. So transformation then would be you alter, or you try to integrate what happened before. Here I've used the word change, but it can be anything. It can be a trauma, it can be a situation, an event, a loss. We often undermine losing someone who's close to us. And that's, again, it requires a whole world of change, the way you approach everything. So when you integrate both with acceptance, with a changed perspective, that is when you'll be able to grow. So it puts you on the road to transformation, rather than just bouncing back, which is resilience. So resilience is you go back to your set point or your baseline. But here you can actually move beyond and reorganize. So once you integrate both is where there will be a lot more growth. And I've just mentioned here some of the therapies like acceptance and commitment. We use it in psychology a lot. If you can't really change much, then we focus on accepting. Logotherapy is developed by Viktor Frankl, as I was telling you. It's about existential concerns, meaning of life, and things like that. And I rightly said earlier, meaning of life and purpose in life actually are one of the drivers for you to change, without which you won't feel motivated. No use of saying, I will try all the strategies to be motivated, inspired. Nothing will work if you don't have purpose or meaning. So all these therapies come under that domain. And I've also mentioned here mindfulness and yoga, which talk about an overview, which talk about having a certain outlook and being in alignment, they say. So some of these practices really help in this line. However, it is hopeful to look at all this. There are people who are so programmed because of repeated bad experiences, and they're quite stuck in that mentality, or in a very survival and defensive mode of functioning. So they're not able to think. Actually, if we're talking about rumination or thinking in a reflective way, people who are severely affected by crisis may not be able to think, and actual brain areas are affected which are involved in thinking. So there you need intervention. So the whole theory that I presented here does make sense when you're in the, at least you're able to think. If you're not able to, it's more severe. The impact is more severe and requires intervention. So coping well is a choice. Keeping in mind any crisis, our response, our attitude, our effort is always a choice. We always have a choice to move towards a negative or move towards a positive, or to remain stuck in a negative or make a change towards positive. So that's always between those two ends. Now, here I want to emphasize one point. Acceptance need not mean understanding fully what has happened. Normally, we tell people, we always ask questions like, why did this happen to me? Why was I chosen for this to happen? Sometimes you won't get answers. It will remain a mystery. Or why did certain negative things happen to you despite you doing a lot of good? I think this we'll talk about in the beliefs also. We believe that if we do something good, we deserve something in return, like that. It should be always fair. May not be always fair. So when you try to accept the situation, you may actually leave that need to understand it fully and accept with whatever you know. And probably the understanding comes in hindsight, which is what most people who grow from different experiences report. They say that looking back in hindsight, looking back in my life reflectively, then I see the meaning of it. Then I see, everything joining the dots and connecting and looking like a complete picture. Otherwise, it's a puzzle. So the first step is to accept, and you can't fully ever understand. You have to keep going with the flow, and it will slowly make sense to you. That's something I feel which we can think about or incorporate into our thinking itself, which will help. And interpretation of the event. Now here I've said the lens which we use, the frame. If you use a dark colored lens and you look at the world around you, it look colored in that color. But if you change it, or if you use a certain power or magnifier, it will look that way. So the lens that you choose to use, what do you want to do with whatever you're looking at? You want to make it colored, you want to make it distorted, you want to make it biased, or you want to look at it clearly. And there are several such things like this. Like even if you look at all these movies where they have a message, they always say try to look at it from a very clear, simple perspective, and it will fall into place. If you're too tangled in everything, you won't be able to see it properly, you won't be able to interpret it more objectively. So any change or any crisis will require a new normal. You can't go back to the old normal because something has changed. So you have to use a new lens to look at that new normal also. And this will help us to shift out of that problem focus. We say we are always in the victim mentality. This happened to me. So when we say it is for me, or you say that, okay, what solution can I have now? What can I do? How can I act? That's moving out of it. And that is the precursor for you to actually move forward. Again, I'm saying Viktor Franklin's quote here because it's very relevant to the slide and to general context. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. So any stimulus is the event and how our response is between that. And we have the power to choose our response. In our response lies the growth and our freedom. Growth in terms of, say, moving out of this victim mentality or the feeling of being stuck. Freedom in terms of seeing that you have more opportunities, you have a new potential that is waiting to be discovered, or just feeling like you are not defined by what is happening to you. You are not defined by the circumstances. Now, a key ingredient to coping well is, any guesses? Now we spoke about crisis and we spoke about all those things which are related to our response to crisis. The main focus of our presentation today, mental agility. So I want to bring in mental agility here and say coping well requires mental agility. Okay. And before we begin to understand it as a mental concept, I want to draw some parallels to it in physical context, because a lot of us are trained and we are also programmed to take care of ourselves physically. Right from school, we are trained how to keep ourselves neat and clean. Hygiene habits like having a bath, or eating the right type of food, exercise. There's plenty of gyan that is given to us on lifestyle. And given the current situations also, people are living an altered routine and a changed routine with limited movement, limited exercise. So we talk a lot about physical body and physical agility or ability to cope up and adapt. Why don't we talk about mental agility the same way? This is a question I want to pose before we start deliberating on it, so that you can already think about how mental agility in your life, how have you actually worked on mental agility? You may have worked on physical agility. So keep this question in mind while we move through this section. Physical agility involves strength, endurance, stamina, and alertness. Broadly, there might be more. But think of somebody who is really training to be an athlete or training to be in some kind of physical activity. They will train by taking care of a combination of these factors like diet, body constitution, what your body is like, how does it respond to exercise, how does it respond to diet, mindset, consistency. No one factor is enough. Just like how we can't say just having a good personality is enough. No, it's always a combination of factors. It's always no one rule suits everybody type of scenario. So that combination of factors is something for you to be aware and discover, and to find out those permutations and combinations, what works best for you. So this is in the physical agility domain, but I would also like you to think parallelly along mental agility framework as well. So you can see here people are training and a lot of effort goes into it. But the thing is here, it's more tangible. You can see results, you can see changes in the weight, you can see changes in the certain muscle buildup or anything. In mental agility, it's not so tangible. That makes it hard, or rather it's negligible. It doesn't come into our focus much. So that being said, so much we talk about physical agility. Why do we not put the same kind of effort, same kind of strategy, same kind of time into developing our mental capabilities? Why do we take it for granted that we are smart, we are capable, we are equipped? It's not always so. Okay. So the point I also want to highlight here is that we do have the ability to develop these things, which is hopeful, which is not very hopeless, like we are a victim of our circumstance. We can intervene. So you can see the brain there is just a symbolic thing, but it's also many more existential and spiritual factors which are involved. It's not just your mind, but so many things. So I want you to start thinking of how you can draw parallels and all, and we'll revisit these points again. It's just remember that it's equally important to work on it. It doesn't come naturally, or it's not something that your muscle tone will not or it will deteriorate, or unless you maintain yourself, you can't just say that my weight will be like this forever. You've got to do something for it. Same way even for the mind, don't take it for granted. Now, mental agility, I have a few definitions and some descriptions to give it a better perspective for the audience. It involves flexibility of the mind. Very important. Think of it in which ways and what all situations will you need to be flexible in your mind. Almost everything. Ability to think critically. That means you should also be able to take criticism constructively. You should be able to engage and interact with people in such a way that there is a give and take. There is some understanding growing about you, who you are, what is your strength, etc. Ability to generate solutions from different viewpoints. Again, not being very stuck, not being very fixed on a certain way of thinking. To grasp new ideas. Unless you have the eye to look for something that is new, you may miss that factor. So you have to have that training itself. Like supposing suddenly if I tell you run into a room and see what has changed in the way things have been arranged in a room that you use, maybe your bedroom or something, you would be able to tell. But if you're not aware of how things are, you won't be able to tell the difference. So you've got to also be prepared to look for these things, and it's a skill. Ability to anticipate and adapt. Don't always be in a mindset that everything will be fine. Always, like we say, when you plan, also plan with a backup or plan with some buffer time for you to respond. So likewise, even mentally, we don't think of it very seriously, but I want you to pause and think. Now, this is a nice book I found online while preparing for this talk today. It's got some really good content. I suggest you can go through it if you're interested. And one of the quotes here, an agile mind allows to thinking flexibly, involves ways of representing and processing information, knowledge creatively, and enables an adaptive attunement to changing circumstances and goals. I think this really beautifully summarizes what is this mental agility. Okay, and if you look at it here, there are many things like critical thinking. There are many things like how we process information, uh, change management, and then taking initiative, being flexible. There are so many combination of factors, and I think that is why mental agility takes a little more center stage when it comes to certain desirable attributes or things about a person, because it has so many components. If you are mentally agile, then you're automatically quite resourceful with many such attributes that come along with it. Okay, so what does being mentally agile look like? It allows you to adapt in every situation, both personal and professional. So I will also like to spend a little bit time on the organizational part, since we have a lot of audience from different organizations or educational institutions. So very quickly, um, it improves learning agility. Now, learning agility is one such thing that is related to mental agility. And mental agility is seen as a component of learning agility. Now, sometimes some books talk about it almost in a similar manner, but I've tried to find something that helps you get a better perspective. And here, it couldn't adapt, so it was doomed. I think this is the law of nature itself. So, being mentally agile is extremely important, whether it's personally or in a professional setup or for an organization or an individual. It is a law of nature, it is the way of life. We've got to keep adapting. So, mentally agile people find it easier to adapt. And when we don't adapt, change will force us to adapt. That's how I look at it, as change being an opportunity. Now, in an organization, this is another useful resource I found. They've given an acronym kind of a thing: anticipate change. Now, they said 83% of CEOs, this is a survey done across many countries in the Western world, and they say CEOs anticipate substantial change in the future. So, are we ready for it? What are we doing for it? Just anticipating may not be enough. Generate confidence. 50% of employees say they don't trust senior management. So, what are we going to do about it? Then, initiate action. 75% of companies are in a process. Like, how do we monitor this? If we are going to initiate some kind of action, there is no way we have a proper system. Liberate thinking. 95% of executives consider employees to be key drivers of innovation. So then, are we really investing in the right kind of employees to actually take that innovation forward? And evaluate results. Agile companies produce 30% higher returns on assets than non-agile. So these are some statistics which I found on this website here. That's also a useful resource which I came across for the organizations. And I think it's important to think of it from different perspectives, not just in life or even the crisis that is currently we are all being faced with is also impacting organizations, industries, education, and everything alike. And then these are some research studies where they say, now what is highlighted there, they proposed a model for organizations saying that sensing, searching, seizing, shifting, and shaping. These are some of the attributes that are important for organization agility. And it may be old wine packaged in a new bottle, but it's important to see how constantly these situations demand us to implement more of these things that we already knew before. Probably the way they present it may be different, or we already know it in some form, but still the reason it's highlighted. Now, moving on to learning agility, it's an adaptability kind of a indicator, okay? And it talks about how quickly we're able to adapt. Now, here there are two things: learning, unlearning, and relearning. Now, we talk about learning as learning something new, but when we learn something new, we should be prepared to unlearn what we already knew, and we should be prepared to relearn the same thing but done in a different manner. That again links with creativity and flexible thinking and all of that. And it's a universal indicator of top talent. And this is kind of now the new way of looking at. Earlier, it was emotional intelligence, which was a big factor. Now, along with that, agility and learning agility is being seen as something that is very sought after. So, given the complexity, we will need these skills because we are always with limited information, new challenges, and we've got to be very, very agile when it comes to learning. Now, this is a quote by a former HRO at Google. He says, agility is going to overtake even, or has overtaken even, education and intelligence. So these two factors may not predict success of the person or the organization. It's also the agility component which plays a huge role. And they say about 30% have this ability. Maybe genuinely, when you talk to the person, they may have already developed this due to different circumstances or by nature, but others can be trained. And given the situation, we will need more of this. So it's a good area to start thinking and investing in. So as I said, mental agility is part of learning agility. Change management. See, these are all terms that you may be using in other contexts in different ways, but the way they have conceptualized it here, I'm just presenting. And you know, our ability to search for meaning, our ability to search for clues, to join the dots, to think outside the box. Even leadership is very strongly correlated with learning agility. And as you know, leaders need to be very agile, need to have very quick thinking skills, need to process information in a certain way. So when you talk about cognitive processing, some people think in a very abstract way. Some people need very concrete information that will impact how the information is used and what they do with it, what results from it. Likewise, mental representation. We may have a certain picture already, we may have a certain idea and expectation, or we may have, we may need more visual kind of data. So many different factors like this play a role in how we are even able to capture the information that is available to us or the situation, how we assess things. So mental agility will provide us that fluidity to move between these different types of thinking, different types of processing. Here I've also mentioned automatic and controlled. Automatic is something like in autopilot, we already think or we feel like we have mastered something, so we become complacent and we use that particular way of doing things. So here, we should be aware of when we should be more quick and automatic, when we should be more controlled and selective in how we look at information. Again, this is another study where they're saying you should invest in learning agility in order to get good leaders, and then the relationship between learning and leadership success. There's a lot of studies. I just found some few relevant ones. And also mindfulness. Even this was mentioned earlier by Prabhudev sir. Mindfulness and leadership flexibility. Mindfulness, there are certain things. Now, it's not just a philosophy or it's not just a practice that you use for your own self growth or improvement. By being mindful, you're focusing on the present. You are able to calm down when you are in a situation that requires you to be calm. You are able to focus on the right things. People who are really successful, if you ask them their routine, they'll say we wake up in the morning and we focus our intent on what needs to be done or what is our goal or what is the plan for the day. It can be done only with a calm mind, not when you are a mindful full mind. Okay, so mindfulness seems to be a very important factor and a good practice even generally. Now we can't suddenly start practicing mindfulness or yoga or exercise when there's a crisis. When there's a crisis, you're likely to just curl up in bed or give up and say I can't do anything. But here, mindfulness or any other practice, if you start doing it on a daily basis, you are likely to transfer those skills even in a crisis situation. So it's important to develop these kind of things which will make you more flexible. Like the last point there, behavioral flexibility, it will be developed and it is important for you to become agile. Now quickly a mention on how education plays a role. We're talking about it being developed, it being used in the organization. How will education play a role, and what is the current system and current scenario? Right now we know that the new education policy has been released and we are trying to make changes accordingly. So there is definitely a need for teaching, learning, evaluation change, the way we conceptualize it, what we inculcate in our students, the way we convey information. Sometimes the way we do things traditionally may be actually limiting, because then you're just teaching them a set things and then you're not allowing them to think on their own or critically. So there should be a paradigm shift in pedagogy, or rather even in a small way it is needed, where we develop curious learners and we also develop critical thinkers. Many times criticism is seen as a bad thing. We get very offended or we don't like to see another perspective because it means that we are not good. So a lot of this can be reversed if from a younger age or right from school or college education, you actually train the person to look at different points of view or to critically critique something that you already know, or be open to perspectives, and that way the learning outcome is maximized. Strategies to develop mental agility should be implemented and evaluated. We are still at the stage where we are making these changes, or rather the current situation has thrown us into this whole new era of online learning, and so many limitations advantages, what model, how you can do with the problem of, with online screen time, so many things. So it needs constant evaluation and, implementing new things that suit the occasion. And it should be one of the graduate attributes. Now, many colleges and management colleges or courses that aim for professional engagement later on do have this, but it's important to conceptualize it as a attribute very specifically and then work towards it. There are many other components like creative thinking, critical thinking, but making it known that this is something you can develop is beneficial. So organizations should adopt a growth mindset. I'll talk a little about growth mindset in the coming slide. I just want to make a mention here of my own institution. St. Joseph's institutions have this Ignatius pedagogy where we already have, I'm sure everybody has their own. This is just an example closer home to me. Context, then what is the experience we are going through? How do we reflect about what has happened or what has changed? Then we act, then again we evaluate, then again we reorganize it back to the context or revise the contextual lens itself. So I think things like this would be a really good way to um, adopt a growth mindset. And this is another study where you talk about what I've highlighted. It's not just teaching to repeat or teaching to, like, create very similar kind of thinking people. Instead, you should help students to vary, teaching to vary. It should foster more agile thinking. And there are several such studies like this, just mentioned a few. So just like physical health and agility, we should develop our mental capability. But the question is, do we always need a crisis to test and develop this agility? Are we not capable of developing it even without a crisis or even without being forced to rethink what are our mental capacities? Do we not think of mental agility as something as we maintain our physical agility? Now, many of us go for a walk regularly or go, carefully. We are very careful about what we consume diet wise, or we say only certain days I will eat certain type of foods, or because of my health condition, I'm doing this. But because of feeling anxious or because of feeling clueless about what you're going to do, you change the way you think or what content you're consuming or just what type of activities you engage in? We are not very intentional with it, or rather there are just a few set of people or small percentage of people who are intentional and who think of it in a very concrete way. So you can develop these habits and practice them without the crisis. Like I was saying, unless you have good habits prior or as a routine, you will not be able to transfer that, because during crisis you're all the more tied up, you are all the more caught unaware, you won't be able to think. Like somebody, I think so was mentioning about the fear psychosis, right? When you're fearful, you cannot think straight, you cannot make a right decision. Likewise, any emotion, we say let the emotions not override your intellect. In psychology, your intellect will be compromised when you are too emotionally charged. Even too happy also puts you in a manic state, and you will not do things which are realistic, or you may end up regretting that I went overboard. And with negative also, it has the same impact. And bodily also, it impacts you a lot. So you start worrying that, oh, I have aches and pains, I cannot breathe properly, I'm feeling nervous, or all those things will happen. Now, how can we develop this? If you look at it in relation to physical agility, how exactly can we develop mental agility? Get the right equipment or the toolkit. Now, if you went to a gym, you will have a gym bag, or you will have a certain, or if you're working out at home, you may find some dumbbells or some treadmill or something, or just anything, whatever helps you to practice, or buy a good pair of shoes that you want to run with, anything. So here you may need to associate with the right type of people. They say the kind of company you have makes a very big impact. People who are inspired generally surround themselves with more people who are like-minded, so they keep each other inspired. And you would know that they old saying also, right? You tell me your friends and I'll tell you who you are. So a lot depends on who are the people you associate with, what inspiration are you drawing, and it sort of puts you at a place where there is a competition of, not in a bad way, but in a healthy way, where you can say, someone is doing this, I can also do this. It gives you a perspective. What kind of content are you consuming? Is it all the time negative things? Is it all the time the worst situation, worst outcome? Or is it something that really helps you? So if you're really interested in building your courage or building your confidence, are you consuming content that is actually helping you in that line? Are you practicing it? Okay. Then how are you assessing your situations and seeing what is the right fit for you? Like I said, if you're buying a pair of shoes, you need to see what size and what comfort and what there are so many attributes of buying a right footwear. So, or if you have flat feet, or if you have a knee problem, or so many factors you keep in mind. So, are you keeping the right equipments that suit your needs? Is important mentally. Know your limits and work towards pushing them strategically. We often get inspired like this. Now today we are talking about it. Everybody may feel a spike in their inspiration and they'll want to change something about their mental agility. It may last a day or two. It won't be sustained for long, or you may overdo it and then say, no, I'm not capable of handling it, or I'm not capable of sustaining it. So knowing what are your limits, knowing where you go wrong, knowing what works well for you, adds up to that preparedness of how you're going to develop things. The right type of nourishment. Now, if it was physically, we would be eating the right food, sometimes taking supplements. Here, we need to have the right kind of self care, the right kind of mental and emotional hygiene. Now, I mentioned earlier also, we're always trained how to keep ourselves physically clean, hygiene. Emotional hygiene is something we never talk about. Has anyone taught us in school how we should handle a failure, how we should handle something that went wrong, how we should handle a disappointment? We have dramatic exaggerations of it shown in different media or even in families where people react in a certain way, but we don't know how, what are the steps to get out of it. So if a lot of people, even for us as psychologists or in this field, people come saying, I don't know what to do, I am stuck, or tell me a way out. So why is it that we can't make our own way? Why is it that we can't identify our own stepping stones and be aware of it, so that when we know what are we feeding ourselves, and what nourishment is helping us for what ability, it will be very much helpful to us. So nourishment will involve taking care of yourself emotionally, physically, and all of that. And also things like gratitude, things like acceptance. Now these are things, maybe it comes with life, maybe it comes with experience, but it's also something you can inculcate. And if you see a lot of examples about people who maintain a gratitude journal, they would say, uh, it helped me to see so many more things that I'm grateful for. Earlier, I would just have one or two things on the list. And as days went by, I'm doing this every day. I find that almost everything I'm so grateful for. It changes your perspective immediately. It immediately puts you into a growth mindset. Keep a first aid kit ready for any failures and setbacks. So what are you going to do if something went wrong? Do you have a plan B? Do you have a person that you can go to? Do you have some kind of a doctor or some resource where you know that you can go for this? Just like how you would have an injury physically, you will also have to take time off. Now if you've fractured an arm, you don't go on continuing using that. So likewise, if you have had a setback, you take some time, recover, and then get back to your routine. So these are simple things, but we don't think of it in a very systematic or a strategic manner. And also to have a support system. Now, people say having a support system is extremely crucial. It is not something that we can do without, because we all require some kind of support, some validation, some feedback from people. And having the right people is important, not just hypocrite type of feedback. So we are moving towards the conclusion part. What promotes our mental agility? Mindset. We talk in general about fixed mindset and growth mindset. So if you can just think by the words itself, fixed mindset will have a very rigid way, a very set way. Like I said, unlearning and relearning won't happen. Whereas in growth mindset, people are already predisposed to look for opportunities. People already think that everything is happening for me, not to me. So try to see what type of mindset is more dominant for you. Take small steps towards changing that. A little more, I'll talk about it in this slide. It's basically a lens or a frame of reference that you have whenever you're looking at different things that's happening around you. What are your expectations? What are the associations you're making? Sometimes we go into a situation expecting it to be in a certain way, and then we are disappointed. So likewise, even this whole situation with the COVID pandemic, we all expected it to subside quickly, then it didn't happen. Then we had to revise it. Now we have become so complacent that it doesn't matter whether we are there with the virus or not. So there are a lot of things in our expectations that determines how we respond. Okay. Activity. Now I want you to just quickly think of anything. Try to locate something in the room which has steel or wood, or touch your nose, or write some random word that comes to your mind. What do we do? We have a dominant way of doing it. Okay, we tend to use a particular hand, a particular memory. We quickly look for familiarity. We quickly look for something that we already are used to. Likewise, we also have a dominant mindset. maybe we are very fixed, or maybe we are very too flexible, which doesn't have any structure. So try to identify what is your dominant mindset and work between the two. I don't mean to propose that having a fixed mindset is bad. It may be working well for things where tried and tested methods are needed, but otherwise it's good to have a growth mindset. Now I won't spend more time here, but I want you to think about instances where you have shown a growth mindset and where you have shown a fixed mindset. Anything in life, right from a younger age to where you are right now. Where have you actually used these type of mindsets? And you can take this exercise probably even later on and try to think and get more awareness of it later also. What are the things which you have done that you are really proud of? Could be an achievement, could be a compliment you got, could be anything that you have done which made you feel proud. Remember the circumstances under which you achieved them. Was the whole circumstance very perfectly arranged? Did you not have any obstacles? Were you not able to do anything despite what limitations you were facing? No. A lot of it was the mindset, the intent, what you intended to do, and things like that. So, mindset plays a very big role, and it's important to declutter our mindset once in a while. Identify what are the people, what are the beliefs which is not serving you, which is not good for you. See, it's something like a SWOT analysis. I think that everyone do it in different disciplines and different situations. You see what is good for you, what is a weakness, where you can actually improve, what you don't need at all, what is the challenge or what you need help with. Likewise, once in a way, decluttering the mind or the mindset is a very healthy practice. Maybe at least every 6 months to 1 year, it's good to keep reinventing yourself. Again, what promotes mental agility? Psychological capital. This is a term, again, psychology and management people use a lot, and they're quite aware what all it entails. But I've just listed about 3 or 4 things here that are crucial for mental agility. Optimism. Now we think being positive, or many times I get asked, oh, positive psychology, so it must be everything is going good in life. No, it won't. Positivity or optimism is not saying that I live in a fairy tale and everything is going to be perfect. That's actually a denial mode where you're trying to say nothing is going wrong. You're not accepting what is there in real. So that will be a toxic positive perspective. Here we need to say things are wrong, but I'm optimistic that I can overcome it, or I'm optimistic that I'll find a resource that will help me. It's the mindset again. So developing that kind of thinking and knowing where you're toxically trying to remove something versus when you're actually using a good healthy optimism is important. Hope, I need not say much. The whole world and every day and everything, we hope. We say good night or we say see you tomorrow, is also hope that we will wake up tomorrow and we will see each other. Without it, we don't have anything to look forward. So it's very implicit and it's something that we cannot do without. Resilience, I told you, it's a way to bounce back. um, Resilience can be built up over a period of time. When people become more and more used to facing crisis, they may say, I'm more capable because I'm already having so many experiences of dealing with struggles. But sometimes it can really pull them down, like too much accumulation of, let's say if you're standing and there are like several heavy blocks put on you, you might crumble. So it requires help. But having a resilient attitude is where you can transfer your learning, you can think of what mindsets helped you, you can ask for help, you know that where you can get support. So it involves many things that are related to agility. Self efficacy is confidence and knowing what you're capable of, knowing what works, etc. So there is always hope. Some of these pictures are found on the internet, but they're quite interactive and very positive. Emotional hygiene, I already mentioned. We need to pay attention what emotions we are facing. It will come and go. Then one thing they say, let the emotions pass. Don't try to be defined by it. That's, oh, I'm sad forever. I'm not a sad person. I am a person who is experiencing sadness. I'm a person who is feeling certain emotion right now. It's important not to define yourself by it permanently. Maybe situations you feel like that was overwhelming. So know how to make that difference. Sometimes we don't know because it's a mix of emotions. No problem. Let it pass. Don't try to make it too definitive and try to make too much sense out of it. Okay. Okay. Cleansing. Now, at the end of the day, if we've gone out somewhere and we're sweaty and dirty or gathered a lot of dust and pollution, we come back and have a bath or we clean ourselves, we change our clothes. Emotionally, also, we need to do that because you may have taken on so many emotions. Sometimes just by being around people who are toxic, you get affected. So for you to be agile and be able to manage your emotions well, you should be able to do some of these things. You need to protect yourself from what doesn't work well for you, or maybe reduce your involvement and not get too attached. Attachment, again, more from a spiritual perspective, also people talk about it. So that's something. And then practice these things. It won't happen overnight. It needs practice. Cognitive strategies. How we represent something. Do we have a very set way of looking at things? Do we have a way like a very abstract way of looking at things, or nothing makes sense or nothing makes meaning? Our thinking patterns cognitively, do we tend to over exaggerate details? Do we tend to selectively look for something that requires our you know that is beneficial for us? How we process information, automatically are we just looking for what we want to confirm what we want, or are we able to change things? uh, Doing is not the, I mean, knowing is not the same as doing. So though we know all these things, now we discussed what is agility, what are the ways you can develop it, what are the things that you can have in mind. Is it the same as doing? No. A lot of times when you want to differentiate people who are successful and who are not, they will know a lot of things, but the ones who are successful are the ones who do it. And doing it should be consistent. We'll talk about that quickly. It requires conscious and consistent effort. It should be intentional. Without that, you will not be able to sustain it. Okay. And over a period of time in psychology, we talk about neuroplasticity. The brain's cells, the neurons that fire together, wire together. You might have heard this, where it shapes the way we react. It's almost like an automatic circuit that gets activated. So repeated intentional activity consistently leads to better habits. It requires us to fully commit ourselves to the goal. If we have a half-hearted nature, then we may be discouraged midway. It gets tough to maintain when the initial enthusiasm wears off, which I told you. And that is why you need to be inspired for you to act. Otherwise, motivation and action and thoughts lead to behavior is a very normal association. What keeps you going is that inspiration. Like we saw even in the examples of people who have overcome obstacles, they're really keen, or they're passionate, or they're very focused on doing something. And that really takes you through. In a sense, consistency is the difference between success and failure. So you have to be consistent. Identify and overcome barriers. Some of the blocks, unhealthy beliefs about myself. I will always deserve this. I am always going to be a failure. I am never going to learn. These are the things, and even in psychology, we talk about neuro linguistic programming. We're constantly telling ourselves a certain way. So you always try to confirm that. I am always late for a meeting. So whenever you come early, you'll be astonished, like, how did this happen? Change the script, change the way you talk, change the way you narrate what is your reality. About others, whatever they do, whatever happens outside will impact me. Again, like I said, you're giving away the power. Whatever happens outside then will determine who you are, what you feel, what you think. That's not right. About the world, like I told you, if you have a very entitled attitude, like I have done this, so I deserve this in return, then you're never going to be happy, never going to be satisfied. Gratitude will be less, learning opportunities will be less, and many such things. So these are just some of the things. There will be many more unhealthy beliefs and distortions. Cognition refers to the way we think, the way we decide, the way we problem solve. So some of the things, like it should be everything, otherwise nothing. You may miss out on opportunities, you may reduce your potential. Overgeneralizing, if it's a small thing, we tend to make it a big issue. Catastrophizing, like that is the end of the world, make it a big catastrophe. Mind reading, I can immediately predict. So once you've predicted, you've already put yourself at a disadvantage. You're not open to what is being shown to you. Fortune telling is very similar. These are just some examples. Mental filter, having a very fixed lens. Emotional reasoning, I told you, emotions will override your intellect. So do not use reasoning and do not try to do a lot of heavy thinking work when you're emotional. Make the difference and separate them from each other. So these are our concluding thoughts now, or the takeaways from whatever we have discussed. And I told you about agility, I told you about crisis, the psychology behind growth and crisis, and some of the strategies. So if you had to think what are the takeaways, I've tried to summarize it in this manner. Practice good habits consistently even when the situation is good. Now, this is something even I may struggle to do, because we are always complacent when things aren't okay, when things are normal. We are in our comfort zone. We are not pushed to change. But if something goes wrong and suddenly you know that, oh, I have to run a marathon, and running that marathon will mean something to me, or I'll get a prize, or I've been chosen, or I've been asked, then you'll quickly get up and start practicing for it. Otherwise, you're going to say tomorrow, maybe today it's too cold, I can't get up, maybe today my leg is paining. You will have a lot of excuses. So practice a good habit as a way to build up yourself. Now, during this crisis, many people say, we feel hopeless, we don't know what to do. Many people, and it's rightly so. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to, crib or, say that things are not okay. What are we able to do? So while you've been laid off or while you don't have an opportunity that you would have wanted to take up, can you build up a skill or can you build up another good habit or another talent or another something, an attribute that would help you? Look for things like that and then be consistent even without. So practicing when things are okay is very crucial. And you would see people who have a good routine, good lifestyle are the ones who are much more organized. Having an organized mindset is much more open to different things. So it's all related. Prioritize your self-care emotionally, physically, unless you're healthy. And I think this situation has taught us, like in such a big way, without your health, we are nothing. Without being healthy and without being able to do something, nothing matters more than our life and our health. So prioritize your self-care. Build up a healthy reserve to fall back on during crisis. So I'm not saying you have to anticipate every day that something's going to happen bad to me, so I have to prepare, I have to meditate, I have to do something. But always have a balanced perspective that life can be good, life can be bad, life is going as expected, life can be unexpected. Not in a way that you anticipate and invite those wrong negative things, but to have a balanced view. So then you will be able to prepare yourself better. Clean your lenses, the lens through which we look at. Maybe even get them changed, change the power, change the style, whatever it is, but keep reinventing, keep looking, or have different set of lenses for different events, for different perspectives. Listen to evaluation and feedback as a way to expand your own perspective. And this I was talking in terms of critical thinking, because here we often think critical thinking will be like inviting criticism, will mean that I am not good, will mean that I have to defend myself. So it's important to get out of that defensive mentality. Whenever someone is saying something, hear it fully, what they mean, and maybe there's some good in that for you. That kind of an approach in general and also while learning will really help us be agile and be flexible. Practice gratitude for what you have. This is a proven thing, not just in positive psychology. If you look at any people, any of the people who practice gratitude, they will say it has changed their life in so many ways. uh, and they also say that focusing on gratitude makes you feel better. It also invites more experiences like that. You're more in alignment with what is good for you. You're more open to opportunities and so many things related to it. Practice mindfulness. We already discussed how it helps you to focus. uh, you know if you're mindful about what really affects you, what is a priority for you, you'll be able to do that, not when you're cluttered and not when you're very um, distracted, but when you're in a calm state of mind. And subconsciously this has a role to play. Like if you look at a lot of the affirmations we use, I am good, they're all positively framed, like I am doing something. They don't say the word no or never or I don't want this. They always say something, and they say you should do it after you have made yourself calm and after you're in a meditative state. Why? Because the brain patterns are such that you're more susceptible. Subconscious programming, we say, it's a very crucial thing. And there are so many, like there are experiments where they tell people, say now if I put one of you on a bus and says you just go and reach this place and draw a particular picture, and likewise I put someone else, when you look at what they have drawn, they may subtly involve elements that they have seen on the way. They may not be aware of it. They would have noticed it at some point, or someone would have been humming a song, that inspiration. So when you track it back and actually look in the video what exactly how that influences, it's tremendous. So subconscious programming and your subconscious potential is also something you should work with very intentionally and with guidance, of course. So mindfulness puts us into that frame. And bringing in spirituality in an everyday life. Now this doesn't mean you have to be very philosophical and very religious or nothing like that. I'm speaking from a perspective of just understanding life itself, having a broad approach, integrating your learning, looking at hardships also as an opportunity. And I think it beautifully summarizes whatever we are trying to talk, whether it was a crisis, looking for change, being agile, being open. If you're more spiritually minded and you bring in that perspective into everything that you do, everything from relationships to work life to personal relation with your own self, with everything that happens around you, you're going to look at things very differently. And lastly, I would like to say your way is the best way. There is no magic pill or best response. We always come and we get asked like, what's the solution? There is no one solution. Be aware yourself, become more tuned to what you are, how you are, and then use that as a best way, best response. And every response, it's not that you found a best response, it's going to work in every situation. It's going to change every time. Intent and action will determine the outcome. Beyond it, you have to leave it to maybe God's plan or however you want to look at life. But there are bigger things as well. Thank you.